right, we start here this hour. Botswana's President Duma Boko is expected to officially open the 2024 Africa Economic Conference in Gaborone, Botswana this coming weekend. The gathering is held under the theme Securing Africa's Economic Future Amidst Rising Uncertainty. It's organized by the African Development Bank, United Nations Economic on Africa and the UN Development Programme. Khayelihle Khumalo joins us with the very latest. Good evening, Khayelihle. First of all, let's look at this conference. What are leaders and experts trying to achieve over the next 3 days?
Well, certainly, Mfundo, quite a very important moment here for Botswana. As you know, that for this country, it's almost like a honeymoon phase where we've seen very significant development with the new administration taking over. So the issues around economic diversification, that's really a talking point in Botswana, especially given all the challenges that are facing this country. But this will enable the leaders, the development practitioners, and the experts really to broaden the conversation, to look at all these challenges that are facing the African economies, whether you're looking at the economic volatility, you look at the issues around the political uncertainty in some instances. But Mfundo, joining us now is Dr. Raymond Gilpin, of course, a chief economist with UNDP Africa. So once again, sir, good evening to you and welcome to SABC News.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely. So, Dr. Raymond, let's look at, first of all, I mean, the talking issues around here, the issues around uncertainty, but also looking at the prospect for the African economies. What does it mean to have such a gathering here?
Thank you so much. This gathering is really important because it brings together three of the largest institutions that focus on Africa's economy: UNDP Africa, UN Economic Commission for Africa, and the African Development Bank together to discuss these issues. Right now is a really, really important time for African countries. The last World Economic Review from the IMF had a really sobering assessment of prospects for Africa. Growth is too weak to address poverty, too weak to generate enough income to invest in health and education, too weak to even create the jobs that we need. And a lot of the weakness is because of what is happening globally. Globally, we see a trend towards polarization. We can't ignore the recent elections in the United States and its impact. We're also seeing a move towards more protectionism, where countries are retreating from multilateral arrangements in terms of trade. This is going to affect African countries as well. And the third thing we're seeing are the wars. Reconstruction after the wars is going to divert so much resources away from Africa's development, as is the prosecution of these wars. And so because of these reasons, we want to sit down and take a considered view of what are the pathways for African countries in the face of so much global uncertainty and potential medium-term volatility.
And just once again, Doctor, looking at the solutions, I mean, for example, you do have the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, quite a very game changer for the continent. But as long as we see what's happening in Mozambique, the post-election violence, as long as we see what's still happening in the DRC, in the eastern parts of that country, Sudan, so many pockets of conflicts, surely it still really poses quite a number of threats for Africa to realize that enormous potential.
Absolutely. And the pathways out of the pending crises are, first of all, we have to look at the trade routes. Most of African countries, the reason why trade is not as effective an engine for growth as it could be is because African countries receive very little of the value in the value chain of the products in which they are involved. And this makes it really, really, really difficult for them. But if you look at regional value chains, African countries have an opportunity to retain a lot more of the value of their commodities and also to manufacture and a lot of the goods on the continent rather than exporting raw materials outside the continent. That's one issue. A second has got to be diversification, because if you look at most African economies, they focus on one or two primary commodity exports. The third thing has got to be the financing of Africa's development. Right now, the challenge is insufficient funds, and when the funds are available, they are too costly for African countries. So we have to do two things. One, we have to lower the cost of borrowing, and that we do by ensuring that some of the issues that you mentioned are addressed, but also ensuring that the pricing of risk in Africa is done in a way that is not disadvantageous to African countries. The second thing that African countries really have to focus on is ensuring that financial leakages are stopped. An UNCTAD study a few years ago estimated this at $90 billion US, which is more than the total amount of foreign assistance African countries receive. And then there's the governance side, because a lot of the conflicts you mentioned earlier have their roots in challenges that are governance related. And so we are seeing the youth, particularly in places like Senegal, recently here in Botswana, being more involved in the political process. That is good, but we really do need governance structures that are more accountable and transparent so that they are supportive of these economic changes that we are looking for.
All right. Dr. Raymond Gilpin, thank you so much indeed. Of course, Chief Economist with UNDP. Quite a lot of issues, plethora of issues really will take center stage during the course of 3 weeks here in Botswana's capital in Gaborone. As you know, this is all about really looking at the economies in Africa. How do you make sure that you revitalize them with all these myriad of challenges? So with that, back to you in Johannesburg.
All right, thank you very much for that reportage. That's our reporter Khayelihle Khumalo out in Botswana for us.